bond conditions were put in place. They haven't been imaged yet, so they're not accessible publicly on the clerk's website. I got a printed out copy of those, and we're going to go over those, but I wanted to add to that as well. Before we get into that, let's discuss a little bit what's PC on this case.
Yes, Judge. So the allegation here is aggravated kidnapping. The complainant in this case is 3 years old. Judge, our date of offense is back on August 21st of 2022. In this case, the complainant's caregiver put her to sleep around 11 p.m. Complainant's mother woke up at 5 a.m. and noticed complainant was gone. Complainant somehow got out of the house. Witness, who knows the defendant by name and sight, the next door neighbor of the complainant, saw the defendant around 1:30 a.m. talking to the child complainant and telling the complainant to stop crying. The witness gave the officers the defendant's address. Officer went to the defendant's address, spoke with the defendant's wife. Wife says the defendant left the house to go drink with friends and called around 4:45 a.m. The wife heard a little girl crying in the background and heard the defendant say, "Please stop crying." The defendant asked wife to come pick the defendant up since his vehicle was broken down. Officers got surveillance video from the apartment complex. The video showed the defendant attempting to lure the child into a vehicle. The defendant then picked up the child's cat and attempted to lure the child with the cat. The defendant picked up complainant, walked complainant to the vehicle, opened the driver door, and the complainant got inside the vehicle. They showed that previous witness a still shot from the surveillance and ID'd it as this defendant. So Judge, officers able to locate the defendant. They canvassed the area and found a motel, Scottish Inn. Showed the clerk a photo of the defendant, and they found the defendant's name and room number through the records. Went to the room, breached the door due to exigent circumstances, where they found the defendant and the 3-year-old complainant in the same bed. Defendant in his boxers, complainant in pajama tops and a diaper. Judge, the defendant made a statement. Said he saw the complainant walking around. Pulled over to ask where the complainant lived. And that he picked up the complainant, that his vehicle broke down, so he got a hotel. They never attempted to contact the complainant's parents or notify the authorities.
Is there any known relationship between this defendant and the complainant or the complainant's family?
No, Your Honor.
Total strangers.
Staying in the same complex with a friend is what the defendant was doing.
Mr. Hernandez's friend was a neighbor in the apartment complex of the complainant's family?
Yes, Your Honor.
So I see some conditions were placed on the defendant. I want to go over those and discuss some amendments to those. But first, it does appear that immigration has already placed a hold on Mr. Hernandez. looks like that hold was placed yesterday with a 0 bond amount. So it appears to me that even if the bail amount that is currently set, which is $1 million, that amount is posted by Mr. Hernandez, he would be brought into immigration custody for them to address whatever needs they have. But I do want to put conditions on this case so that if Mr. Hernandez is released, these conditions will be in place. The first condition already in place is that the defendant shall personally appear in court on time every time this case is set on the court's docket, unless I waive the appearance. Next condition that's already in place is that Mr. Hernandez shall commit no crime and shall not engage in any conduct that could result in his or her arrest. Another condition in place is that any passports must be surrendered. And I see a condition of electronic monitoring with house arrest. In terms of the electronic monitoring with house arrest, I believe I would prefer GPS over electronic monitoring. I would keep the house arrest in place, but my understanding is electronic monitoring only gives us data about whether or not somebody is in their house. But if they leave their house, we have no idea where they are. Whereas GPS tells us where somebody is at all times. So I think I want to change the electronic monitoring to GPS. I will waive the fees for the GPS. And I wanted to add some additional conditions that I did not see in place. The first one is I don't want Mr. Hernandez to have any contact with the complainant or any members of the complainant's household or family. If there's any need to have contact, that contact must go through Mr. Hernandez's attorney or people representing the attorney, investigators, or otherwise. Also going to order that Mr. Hernandez shall refrain from going within 500 feet of the complainant's residence. I'm going to order that Mr. Hernandez is to remain within Harris County and its contiguous counties. I'm going to order that Mr. Hernandez must not use, possess, or consume marijuana or any controlled substance or dangerous drug unless it's prescribed by a doctor licensed in the state of Texas. And if you have any such prescriptions, you have to provide copies of those prescriptions to your pretrial supervising officer. Also going to order that Mr. Hernandez is not allowed to use or possess any firearm, ammunition, or any deadly weapons. Are there any other conditions being requested at this time? Or any questions about those?
Yes, Judge. The The state is requesting that based on the nature of the offense, that Mr. Hernandez not participate in any activity that includes children who are 17 years or younger.
I will sign off on that as well. Is there any request of the defense at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. In regards to the bond, with the understanding that there's an immigration hold, but in the future, if that were to be lifted through the immigration courts, I want to address the bond. Mr. Hernandez has lived in Houston for over 28 years. He was here on a work visa. I understand it may have lapsed, but he was here legally working as a commercial electrician for the last 2 years with the same company. He's married, has a 20-year-old child, family, and ties to the community. He has virtually no criminal history, I believe, with prior DWI conviction. I think the interests of the safety of the community can be ensured with the conditions that you've outlined. And so we're requesting a $100,000 bond, Your Honor. In addition to that, taking into light the PC, Your Honor, this is, and I know it's early to argue this, but I believe, the state will have to make a case that this is aggravated, but I didn't hear any aggravating factors. I think they're alleging super aggravated sexual assault and serious bodily injury, things of those nature. I think there's 4 different paragraphs in the complaint. And I didn't hear any allegations of any of those. It's saying that being a kidnapping at the end of the day is not an aggravated kidnapping, that is indicted. Taking those things into consideration, the defense is asking for a $100,000 bond.
And Judge, if I may?
Sure.
The facts we have before us is that this man took a 3-year-old girl from the room and then over the course of the night told her to stop crying and told her to stop, not telling anyone about this, not calling the police, not telling even his wife. So based on the nature of the offense, Your Honor, and more facts will come out during the investigation aspect, the $1 million bond is more than appropriate at this time.
I guess some quick questions. Do we know if the complainant was taken in for medical care or testing, or do we not know at this point because this case is so new?
Judge, the complainant has had a scene exam.
Okay.
The CAC interview is going to be conducted at some point. So, like I said, more facts will come. The SANE exam did release some information that we can tell the court at some other time.
Sure.
It's private in nature, but
So what I'll do is I'm going to leave everything in place for today. Mario, I understand you were just appointed on this case this morning, and I understand the state has limited information at this time. As information develops, as the investigation for both sides proceeds, if any additional information either is aggravating or mitigating, please come back and let's discuss further. With the information I have before me, this is very concerning. So for today, especially with an immigration hold already in place, I'm going to leave everything as is in terms of bail amount. But again, if more information becomes available, come on in, bring it to me. Let's have a further discussion. Because I do understand these cases are dynamic. Things are constantly changing. Information is made more available. That information can cut either way, but I'm more than happy to hear it at a future date. And as we progress, I don't mind information being brought to light, being brought to the court whenever it's available. So it's not a one and done thing. You get some information this week, you get more information next week, keep letting me know, and see what we can do. Any other questions or concerns?
No, Your Honor.
nothing to say, Your Honor.
I will get those amended conditions drafted up, and then the court's pretrial officer will go back and admonish Mr. Hernandez and have him sign off. All right, if you want to be there during that process, feel free. and we get whatever we send to each other.
Thank you. Thank you. No problem.
I did my circle, I changed and see if there's something other cases.
Oh, okay. I'm approaching on Old Jacobs. He had 3 cases, Mr. White being able to go last night. For one of his cases, he's going to be one thing requesting is there's more
Officer wasn't struck, he said struck by a vehicle. Exactly. Nevertheless, he is struck by the
Victor Williams.
Okay, now I know Dak Cohen. This is Brian Cohen. He's a compulsive gambler and a habitual liar. But he is a pretty good lawyer. Watch out.
everyone needs you, Judge. We're going to let go.
We're getting up.
Mario Madrid, it's Mario-Madrid.
Can you tell us what happened in court today with your client?
Today, the judge was just listening to probable cause and also giving the conditions of bond. In this case, you may have heard, you may have not heard, that there's an immigration hold and there's $1 million bond. So the judge was assessing bond conditions should Mr. Hernandez get released from jail on a bond. It's not likely because then he would go to immigration where there's a zero bond also.
And do you have any details on why he's got an immigration hold?
I do, but I don't want to get into any of this. I will tell you that he has lived in this country for 30 years with a work visa legally. He's an electrician. He's got a wife and a child that's 20 years old. Sometimes in those circumstances, if renewals aren't done, you run into getting an immigration hold, particularly also if you have an aggravated kidnapping, any kind of case, and you're not a United States citizen, you have a chance of having an immigration hold.
Where is he from?
He's from Honduras. There was just questions regarding the bond and why I asked for a lower bond. My client doesn't have any criminal history other than a DWI. Typically, a case like this would carry a bond of maybe $50,000 or $100,000. That would be the appropriate bond, and for those reasons I was asking. It's likely a moot point because he has an immigration hold. The other thing that I discussed is that I was explaining is that the reason I was requesting a lower bond is because there isn't any evidence that this case is aggravated. The accusation is of a kidnapping, and there's allegations or an accusation in the complaint of either super aggravated sexual assault, the attempt to hurt the child, and there wasn't, you didn't hear any of that in court because there isn't any evidence of it. And for those reasons, I was asking for a lower bond. And there was also a question regarding immigration, and I said I can't specifically discuss that, and I have to investigate that. Other than he has been here on a work visa. The question was whether he had a TPS. So I think that's everything y'all asked, correct?
What is his mental state? I mean, he should have known better if there was a child wandering around to, return the child to the authorities.
Well, those are questions that will have to be answered as the case goes along. I've been on the case just less than 30 minutes, so it's something I have to investigate.
Yeah. My name is Philip White, Chief Prosecutor, 232nd District Court. Philip, Phillip, and last name is White, like the color, White.
What are we going to hear today?
Well, we're here today to have this defendant brought before court to address his bond conditions, to make sure that he was held at his current $1 million bond. Judge Hill did that today, did not lower the bond, and put certain conditions in if he were to make bond. These include house arrest, GPS, no contact with children, and different things like that to ensure the safety of the community.
And this guy has an immigration hold. Any other details on that, what it's for?
I'm not entirely sure. I do know there is an immigration hold, but to the extent of that, my knowledge for it.
And then if he hypothetically was to post bond, would he then go into ICE custody if that's what happens?
My understanding would be the $1 million bond, if you were to make it, the ICE hold would then take effect. ICE would then take custody of him. If that were to be addressed too at some point, he then would be on bond with those conditions you heard. There's a lot of steps in place though.
What country is he from?
I'm not sure at this time.
What's next in the case?
Well, right now, this case is still pretty new. A lot of developments are still happening with it. There's different exams and different conversations are going to happen with the complainant in this case. So it's still growing. We're still learning a lot about it. So now we just kind of wait. We wait for those things to come in, and once we have that information, that'll be the next step.
Can you talk about the exams that you're waiting for and why?
At this point, we just need to make sure we need to find out what happened with that child. And so that's the purpose of these exams, to talk to her, to see what happened, and see if that's going to change how we process the case going forward. Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, right now, I just can't say exactly what those conversations are because I'm not entirely sure. We're still learning about them.
And how challenging is it to conduct those interviews with a toddler?
It can be very difficult, but luckily there are trained people who handle that perfectly. So they know exactly how to have those difficult conversations, how to have those tough terms to talk about what happened and what didn't happen, and that's what's happening now.
To have the judge add those extra conditions and modify a couple to better secure that they know where he's at, what does that mean for you as a prosecutor to know that the judge is doing what they can to protect the community?
It makes our life a lot easier. I mean, usually, we get along pretty well, lockstep, but it's really nice having the judge address those additional conditions that could make the community safer. Anything else?
Has he been cooperative, stop saying what happened or anything like that? Has he said anything?
Right now, there's just so much with the investigation. I think he made a statement to the police, something along the lines of nothing happened, which we don't believe, and that's why we're going forward with it.